Welcome back to CryptosRUs. I am George. We're all George. In this interview, I'm talking to the co-founder and CEO of Hedera Hashgraph, Mance Harmon. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I think there's a lot of people that want to really know about Hashgraph. It has been around for a while, but I know you guys keep executing. There's a lot of exciting things, and there may be some misconceptions I think we can hash out in this interview.
That sounds great.
So why don't we just start, because I was looking at your resume on LinkedIn, and I see you have extensive experience, a lot of computer science experience with AI, some experience with the Air Force. But the one thing that really stuck out to me is the time when you worked on the Missile Defense Agency on the Missile Defense War Game.
Yeah.
I remember when I was a kid, I remember watching that movie that I think had something like that. Could you talk about that?
You're referring to the movie War Games,
Yeah.
back in the 1980s with Matthew Broderick. I like to say that we built the real thing, and in some ways it's actually true. The Missile Defense Agency, back when I was there, back in the late 90s or around 2000, 2001, 2002 timeframe, had a program called War Game 2000. And the whole point of the program was to build this massive simulator that would allow what we would call the shooters in the field, those that would actually execute on shooting down ballistic missiles, intercontinental ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and the command and control structure all the way up to the president's representatives.
Wow.
And they've come together, and we would have all these mock-ups with the different sensors and weapon systems, and we would play war games to figure out how to fight that kind of battle. If anyone in the world decided to launch ICBMs at us, how would we knock them out of the air? And how would we protect not just the US, but its allies? I had the good fortune of being able to lead that program for a couple of years. I forget, 2 or 3 years, something like that. And it was a fantastic experience, and loved it so much, I decided to quit the Air Force and become an entrepreneur. Tongue in cheek, but yeah, it was a lot of fun.
With that, I mean, I don't want to go too much into this, but with that simulation, wouldn't be like whoever fires the nukes first wins usually?
Oh, I mean, that's the whole point. It's fascinating, the calculus of how you fight a nuclear war in this way, and what goes into the negotiations on arms controls and why, et cetera, et cetera.
So can you tell us in your own words, if you were describing Hashgraph to just a normal person that wants to learn, that has no idea, how would you describe it to them?
Somebody that knows nothing about Hashgraph or nothing about the industry, just Hashgraph?
Oh, yeah. It's up to you. How would you describe it?
Yeah. So Hashgraph, there are two parts to the answer. One is Hashgraph as an alternative to blockchain. And the other one is, what is Hedera as a network compared to the other networks in the market? And Hashgraph is a superior sort of next generation to blockchain. It's not blockchain. It doesn't look anything like blockchain, but it solves the same category of problems that blockchain solves. In other words, it's a distributed consensus algorithm. It does all the same stuff in terms of the benefits that it provides in not having to trust a third party to manage this database. Effectively, we all are sharing a database, and we don't want to, as a group, we don't want to have to trust that there's this central party that when we give transactions to them, that they can withhold those transactions or modify those transactions or delete them, or maybe create the database, but only show some of us one version of the database and others a different version of the database. We don't want to have that trust element. We want to eliminate the need to trust anybody. We just want to know that the math protects us all from those kinds of attacks. That's what blockchain does. That's what Hashgraph does. Hashgraph just happens to do it with much better performance and much better security. And when I say better, what I mean is Bitcoin and Ethereum today, 7 transactions per second globally and 15 respectively, Bitcoin and Ethereum. Today in the throttled version of the platform, Hedera, the network that implements Hashgraph, we process 10,000 transactions per second, and we have capacity for 10,000 transactions per second, and that's in the beta version. So there's just a huge difference in terms of performance and cost. As a result of that, the cost is hugely different as well. All right, a cost per transaction for us is a tiny fraction of a cent or a penny.
Right.
And it's final within a few seconds with 100% certainty. Very much different than those first generation technologies. And so that's what Hedera is, a network, a global network that uses Hashgraph to create this shared platform, the shared database or ledger for the industry. And it's managed and run by trusted organizations on a global basis. One of the obstacles to adoption that we identified years ago when we started all this was the need for the market to trust the governance of this hosted public platform. And so we started way back at the beginning by saying that we're going to have professionals that are experts in their respective disciplines, legal and regulatory, technical, finance, economics, etc., provide the oversight and governance of this network. And today that's what Hedera is. It's a network that implements Hashgraph, and it's governed and managed by a global council of world-class organizations to provide that market trust that we identified was needed.
Let me ask you something based on what you just said. So I'm a little confused by this too. So I realize Hashgraph, don't call it blockchain, let's just call it a ledger, right?
Sure.
Is that fair?
Yeah.
But then you're referring to Hedera, as the network. What's outside the ledger that's part of the network? Can you explain that?
Sure. Well, so Hashgraph is not actually the ledger. Hashgraph is a consensus algorithm. It's just a way of allowing the participants to come to agreement on an order of transactions, a consensus on the ordering of transactions. Separate from that ordering of transactions is the ledger, the database. Right. And the database gets updated, from this stream of ordered transactions. And all the different nodes in the network have a local copy of the ledger, and they receive the same stream, and they all update their local copy of the ledger simultaneously. And they, you can be certain that all of those ledgers are in sync, that they're consistent with one another. So Hedera is the network of nodes run by these global organizations that I was describing that creates the ledger that uses Hashgraph as the consensus algorithm.
So that makes a lot more sense. So Hedera is actually the ledger. Hashgraph is just a reference to the consensus algorithm that the ledger uses.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's precisely right.
So why do you guys, I'm just curious, why are you listed then as Hedera Hashgraph? Because every other blockchain project would just say, Cardano or VeChain or Harmony. They don't actually say the consensus after. Why did you guys name it that way?
No, it's a fair question. It has everything to do, in this case, it's entirely a legal issue. Hashgraph is a generic term, and frankly could not be trademarked to say this is a particular network that's using Hashgraph versus any other network. And so Hedera Hashgraph is just a trademarked name of the network that happens to be using Hashgraph. Having said that, we recognize that Hedera is going to be, referred to as Hedera, increasingly referred to as Hedera, and Hashgraph would just get dropped from the
Right.
name. But that's it. It was just a technical legal matter dealing with trademarks.
Gotcha. Makes sense. Okay, so you mentioned about well, you mentioned about speed, but also I think security is a big thing, which
Yeah.
is why you guys have a Hedera governing console. And I think that's what's really impressive. I checked it out. There's 39 organizations, and some big names are part of that: Boeing, Google, IBM, LG, Deutsche Telekom, among others.
Yeah.
So talk about this process. How did you select these companies, and are they actively involved with Hedera right now?
Yeah. Well, so we're about halfway there. You're correct that we're growing to 39.
Growing. Okay.
We're growing to 39. We're about halfway there. And yeah, the process from the beginning, we recognized the need to have both decentralized transaction ordering, which all the platforms do,
Mm-hmm.
but also decentralized governance. And some of the platforms do it better than others, and a lot of them do it really poorly. And what we wanted to do was come up with a model that objectively would represent the most decentralized governing body of any of the public platforms out there and still do a good job of governance. And let me explain
Okay.
what I mean by that. You know, this is going to be a little bit academic, but there are three models in my mind for governance. You could have a dictator. The problem with having a dictator is that all you have to do is corrupt one person and you got problems, right? And so, the other end of the extreme is full democracy. And
Right.
full democracy works pretty well if the decisions that are being made aren't very complex. In other words, you don't need experts making the decisions.
Right.
In that case, cool, democracy works. But if you're making complex decisions, then you can't have a democracy. You really need a sort of representative group of people to be experts and make wise decisions when they're in their decision process. And that's where we fall. That's where the whole industry really falls. The decisions that are normally being made related to governance of public networks are complex decisions. They're not simple decisions. And so we're not a fan of pure democracy when it comes to governance. When we talk about governance, I'm talking about things like product roadmap, the features that
Mm-hmm.
get prioritized. I'm talking about oversight of legal and regulatory matters that are associated with the platform and how all that plays out. And I'm also talking about the allocation and use of treasury. So, all of these are complex decisions.
Right. Right.
What we wanted was a governing body that was both diverse in that it represented all the markets and all the use cases, not focused on a single geography or a single vertical, and also dynamic through time. And so we chose organizations that were well respected, are well respected. We chose them to be geo distributed. You don't see, a concentration in the United States, for example. We want them from around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally, they're cross industry, not a bunch of banks, for example, or tech giants, but cross industry. And then finally, through time, it changes. So members of our organization can stay members for up to 2-3 year terms for a total of 6 years. And then they have to leave and
Oh,
somebody else
really?
comes in. Yeah. So by doing that, what you end up with is, or the theory, we created this, we're hoping that what you end up with is a governing body that has the expertise needed to have oversight of all the things I've described, but also represents the total market in what is needed in terms of product roadmap and features for, for the most important applications and dApps that are going to be created on a global basis.
So that's interesting. So this election process about with these terms. So can you describe more about that? Like, who votes them in? Who gets to this? Is it the other governing bodies that are voting them in? How does that work?
It started, obviously, it had to start with us, the staff, just making the decisions.
Okay.
And as the council has matured and continues to mature in terms of its ability to provide the oversight that's needed, there'll be a membership committee that ends up taking over that function and role. And I would expect that is imminent. It's in the nearer term that the membership committee takes full responsibility for that. Like I said, we're about halfway there in terms of council members. We really started operationalizing the council in February of 19. So 2 years ago, we had the first council meeting with the first 5 members in February of 19. And, since that time, we've been adding council members, and the rate of adding council members is now accelerating, for a whole variety of reasons. And so the operations of the council are maturing very nicely. And this is one of those last things, frankly, to sort of stand up and give over to the council to manage in a decentralized way.
So if I heard you correctly, so you're getting up there, you're getting up to the 39, you're about halfway. Right now, Hedera is still selecting who gets to be a council until this membership
committee
body, right? That will vote on future council members, right?
Exactly. Well, I'm just going to point out a subtle distinction between what you're saying and what I'm saying. Hedera is the council. And this is an important point. Hedera is an LLC, Delaware based. And the council, when a new member joins us, they're legally becoming a member of the LLC. So we go through an M&A process with every member. Yeah.
Oh,
it's not like a marketing deal, right? It's like the real deal. Hedera is the council. And I just happen to be part of the staff.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I mean, we created it, and then we gave up control. And I report to the board of managers. If the board of managers wanted to fire me tomorrow, they absolutely could do so. And so the council really does. It's a distributed governing body that governs. It's a community of large organizations that are making this work.
So how is you mentioned about the decision making, obviously complex decisions. I totally agree with you, because there are some projects that say we're going to go 100% decentralized. And I'm just thinking there's no way. People just can't vote on important decisions, like what you said, complex decisions.
Yeah.
So how does that work right now within the council, within Hedera? Like, does the council or the members of the council propose something, or do you guys have some kind of roadmap structure ready that you present to the council members and then they vote? How does that whole process work?
Sure. I'm happy to sort of give you a peek behind the curtain, so to speak. So we meet as a council every 2 months. Before COVID, we were meeting once a quarter, and it was all face to face, and it would rotate from continent to continent. Now it's every 2 months for 2 or 3 hours. Of course, it's a Zoom call. Those are the council meetings. In addition to the council meetings where we get together and we talk about use cases, we talk about progress and in terms of adoption, et cetera, et cetera. There are these different committees that have been created. Technical committee is an example of one. And anyone in the council that has an interest in participating in a committee that has, for whatever reason they want to participate, they can do so. And the committees meet on an as needed basis. It's different from committee to committee. And they have oversight of the respective area of concern. So Lehman Baird, my co-founder, inventor of Hashgraph, he chairs the TechCom. And, there are a whole range of committee members that sit in there, and they look at the roadmap and the features, and they end up collectively deciding on the ordering and the prioritization of those fees. Same thing is true for the legal, and we got what we call RegCom, regulatory committee. So it's the legal and regulatory committee. And who's on that committee? It's the attorneys, right? It's the lawyers from the different council members that have an interest in these matters. And that's the way it works. And the board of managers meets every 2 weeks, and their task forces sometimes that get created, chartered by the board to focus in on specific issues that need to be dealt with or addressed. And, the task force will come back with proposals. It's just a distributed oversight function that is a combination of a standards body as well as a fantastic customer advisory board in some ways. And expertise is being provided by those that have it for every part of the business.
Okay. Very interesting. Is it fair to say, a lot of people in the industry, let's just say, is turned off by Ripple because they operate more like a for-profit company rather than an open source project?
Yeah.
Is it fair to say Hedera is also operating more like a for-profit company, or do you say that's not true?
Not at all. Well,
Okay.
it's completely the opposite. And so let me demonstrate. I said each one of the council members, when they join, they're joining an LLC.
Mm-hmm.
But when we created the LLC, the bylaws of the LLC were structured so that the incentives were aligned with a not-for-profit. And the LLC function is just to provide liability protection. I mean, that's the reason we chose LLC versus a 501c, right? Or something, right? Some other structure.
Right.
So there are no dividends. I mean, if we have profits, it's not the case that the profits go out to the different council members by bylaws. That's not possible. That it won't happen.
Okay.
So it's structured such that it's more like a standards body or an alliance in its operation and function, with the liability protection that's presented there with an LLC. There's another big difference between us and Ripple, and that is that we're distributed. I mean, we're going to 39. Pardon me. We're going to 39 as a starting point, and in terms of consensus and community involvement, it's going to grow way beyond that. There will be community nodes that are run by non-Hedera council members that will come online, in the very near future as well. So the goal is to have this scale up into a giant community. We just wanted the best starting point from which to bootstrap.
Okay, great. So let's talk about something that I noticed you guys, you have it on your screen right there. the new token service, which is very interesting. I just read there was like a music project, Tune FM, that declared they're utilizing your token service. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, well, so the token service, maybe it's helpful to give a little bit of background here to set context for why the token service. Like I said, in 2019, we operationalized the council, and we opened the network to the public in the fall of 2019. 2020 was a year of finding good product market fit. And what I mean by that is we observed what the market was doing with our first 3 services. We provided cryptocurrency as a service, distributed file storage, and smart contracts, Solidity specifically. And we just observed what the market did. And the market led us to creating 2 additional services. One is the Hedera Consensus service, which is basically just exposing Hashgraph as a service. Think of it like blockchain as a service, just transaction ordering, and that's it. And there's a lot you can do with that. And IBM really was a proponent of that and help us, write the initial white papers and everything. But then separate from that was the market demand for the same kind of performance that we have in our cryptocurrency service for tokenization, and the same cost structure as well. And so through the fall, last year, we created the Hedera token service. And we launched it in February of this year formally. We had the marketing launch, and it actually launched in January. We had the marketing launch in February, and it doesn't use smart contracts. I mean, one of the defining characteristics of HTS is that you don't have to, if you're a developer, you don't have to worry about making modifications to a smart contract and then going and getting a security audit and all the work that goes into that, and what problems can go wrong, and then development environment for that smart contract, what the limitations are. And then if you're wanting to make modifications for whatever reason in the future, how you migrate from current version of smart contract to the next version, all that set of problems we did away with by simply building the token service natively into the platform as a first order service. And now we've got, we launched it in February, like I said, with 60 plus partners, in our ecosystem, from exchanges to custodians to token issuers, et cetera, et cetera. And Tune FM is an example of one of those, and there are many others. But the idea is that for most of the market that cares about spinning up tokens very quickly, with a feature set that sort of covers 80% of all the things you might ever want to do with a token, like minting tokens and burning tokens, and maybe locking accounts, maybe doing KYC, AML on accounts, et cetera, those kinds of things. All that's built in. And in addition to that, we use multi-sig technology that makes it possible for people that have roles that manage these different aspects of the token. Like, for example, if you have somebody that's responsible for deciding whether to increase your token supply, you don't want all that control in the hands of a single person. I mean, that's a big deal. I can't imagine one person increasing the number of tokens and increasing the number of hbar that exists out there, right? So everybody has the same concern, and we built it such that you can have full decentralization in the management of those functions through multi-sig technology, and it's all native.
So that sounds really good. Is there any plans on expanding the tokens for NFT purposes?
Absolutely. So you can already do it today, and there will be additional features that are being created already by the community that just make it possible to do more and more of what the community wants to be able to do with our token service. And that's what we hoped for, right? What we hoped to do was build the core foundational blocks that provide the primitives needed for the community to then turn around and build a whole set of bells and whistles on top that that any given market or developer might like to have, in addition to what we provide natively.
Let me ask you, because you mentioned about IBM. So very early on, IBM, seemed like they wanted to work with Stellar to create like a Ripple competitor, like something with WorldWire, but that seems to have died down. I've noticed a lot of their, initiatives within the last few years, they've been working with you guys exclusively. So is that the thing now that let me rephrase that. Do you guys have a lot of initiatives with IBM right now, utilizing your products that you've been mentioning?
what I can say, so I don't have firsthand knowledge at all of what they're doing with anybody else. But what I can say is that the amount of collaboration and the interest and excitement about the project and how the two organizations work together has certainly been moving in the right direction from my perspective. Right, there's a lot going on, more today than ever before, and that has been accelerating. So yeah, that's and that's not true. That's not just true for IBM. We have a bunch of council members now, and in vast majority of those cases, those relationships, what's happening is that after now years of those organizations experimenting, not just with us, but generally in the market, and trying to understand what's it mean for them and how's the market going to evolve and over time, and what are the mechanics associated with realizing real value, real, top line and bottom line value from distributed ledger technology. A lot of that's been worked out. And what's happening is it's now being implemented in a real way, in real applications that are going to in enterprise grade, enterprise led applications that are going to market. Avery Dennison is one of our council members. They're a great example of this. They just launched atma.io, and it's a platform that makes it possible to track and trace arbitrary products or things, widgets, through supply chains. Each widget gets its own identity, and at certain points along the chain as it flows through, the widget flows through the supply chain, it uses the Hedera consensus service to record information about what's happening, and you have this immutable log of the provenance of those products that are flowing through the supply chain. That's just one example, but it's happening on an increasing basis and at an accelerating rate with all of the companies that are in the council.
Nice. Let me ask you, this might be difficult to answer. Does the council members look for products that's more suited for, I would say, business use versus retail use? Is that fair, or they're really looking at all use cases?
It really depends on the council member. We have council members, we have a variety of them. Some of them, I loosely group them into two categories. And this is an oversimplification, but one category of council member provides infrastructure. And I'm thinking like cloud infrastructure and professional services associated, that sort of thing.
Okay.
And then another category could be those council members that have interest in building an application or a DApp and going to market with it. And the two sort of work well together, because you need infrastructure services, you need professional services support and integration work, and then you have the the verticals, the companies that have vertical applications. Now, the companies that have the vertical applications, they span a wide range. Boeing, of course, is in the airline industry. Magazine Louisa is selling retail in South America. Those are very different businesses, and so it just depends on the businesses that they're in as to what their focus is, whether it's B2B versus B2C or B2B2C. It's all over the board.
Interesting. What about DeFi? Is that something that you guys are concentrating on?
Yeah. So I think DeFi is really important. I know that there was a lot of hype around it last year. I expect the hype is going to continue. But some of that is not so good. Having said that, the concepts that, the underpinnings of DeFi, I think are exceptionally cool and are going to change the way finance works in the future. But here's an example of what I'm talking about. If you take what Avery Dennison was doing with their supply chain platform, you end up basically having a table that has a list of rows, and each row is associated with an asset, a product, a widget. Call it a shoe, maybe it's a sneaker. And if you then take that and you just layer on top of it tokens, in other words, for every row, instead of it being a row in a ledger, a database, that row is now represented by a token that contains the same information. So the token represents a specific pair of sneakers, and it has all the provenance information associated with those sneakers. And as the sneakers are being created from from raw materials flowing through the supply chain, tokens are designed for economic activity, the transfer of tokens from one party to another. Those tokens, in combination with componentized finance, meaning the opportunity to get a capital loan, from a bank, with the exchange or putting up the tokens associated with the sneakers as collateral, and then at each step of the way, you can use DeFi in combination, perhaps with stable coins and tokenized assets for, getting product insurance or factoring accounts receivable. This is the DeFi that I think is way cool, because it's going to change the way finance works globally, in every supply chain. And it necessarily means that everything that you look at, everything you touch, is going to get tokenized, right? The whole world's going to be nothing but tokens that flow through these these new components of finance, and it's all going to be hosted on layer one protocols like Hedera.
Yeah, because even what you said, I mean, ownership also, can be defined within a token, and it can be very easily, I transfer my token to you. Now you own that pair of sneakers, right?
Exactly. I mean, everything is going to be tokenized. It's almost like part of the way I sort of think about it is that we have these distributed ledgers. And when we talk about integrating ledgers, cross-ledger integration, what we really mean is the ability to have tokens that are flowing from one ledger to another, right? And in that context, we have this massive ledger of tokens that's common to everybody, even though it's hosted on different platforms, different layer ones. And the tokens are the information that's exchanged across those ledgers.
So speaking of that, I've noticed on your roadmap for second half of 2021 is interoperability. So can you talk about that? What are you guys doing in terms of multi-chain communication?
Yeah, so I mean, we're working with partners that are core to that industry in terms of making it possible to do exactly what I just said. Effectively take tokens and move them from one platform to another, in terms of wrapping tokens back and forth. So there is that. And then in addition to that, we have a technology we've talked about in the past. It's being worked out now, and I think we'll end up going to market in the fall. State proofs. I won't go into it. It's a little technical now, but I think that state proofs are going to be really important for being able to convince other networks, that the assertions that are being made by any given network is true. And that's the reason we have validator networks today. Is if Hedera wanted to, if anybody wanted to move a token from Hedera to say Ethereum or whatever, then the receiving platform needs to know that the token has actually been locked up or indisposed in some way on Hedera, on the token, the platform from which the token is coming. So those assertions of truth and the ability to trust them is going to end up being really important in terms of cross-ledger communication and trust. And we're working on stuff that will be important for that in the future.
Interesting. Something else I saw, I guess I didn't quite understand because as far as I know that you mentioned this, Hedera is extremely quick, but I saw sharding also on the roadmap.
Yeah, well, it's funny you say that because sharding is this is the same discussion, right? When we talk about scaling, today we can do 10,000 TPS, again, throttled on a single shard. And that first shard are the council members. And we're going to end up adding other nodes to that first shard, community nodes to that first shard. But when you want to scale, what you end up doing or needing to do is there are a couple ways to do it. The approach that we've taken is that we're going to have multiple shards, other networks that exist that have nodes that are running our software. And when those shards talk to each other, you need to be able to trust that what they're saying is true. In other words, it can't be that a single computer in a shard is sending the information to a different shard and the receiving shard trusts the single computer. No, that receiving shard needs to be able to trust the information, and that means all the nodes in the shard are making attesting to the information that's being sent across. And this is what state proofs are. And with the creation or the completion of state proofs and a little bit further development of token economics and in certain ways, then we will absolutely stand up sharding, and that just scales the network, from a single shard to many hundreds or thousands and many tens of thousands of nodes.
So by that point, then Hedera will be able to handle, I don't know, I'm just throwing out, extreme example, someone like Facebook, because Facebook processes like millions of transactions per second, right? And then even it just seems like that's something that's out of the realm of possibility for blockchains or ledgers right now, because I mean, quite frankly, Ethereum is still operating at like 10 transactions or 15 transactions per second, right?
That's exactly right. I mean, Hedera can already handle most payment networks volume, the volume associated with payment networks. And when it comes to, those that I didn't know Facebook was at millions, you could absolutely be right. I've never looked at it. But, when it comes to millions of transactions per second, that's the way you end up doing it, is through some kind of scaling mechanism like sharding in our case.
All right. So is there anything, I mean, we talked about a lot. Is the proofs, or you mentioned ZK proofs?
State proofs.
Stake proofs. I'm sorry. Stake proofs. Is there anything that you're really looking forward to, or is that that's coming up?
Well, what's gratifying is just to see the adoption. We have had a lot of adoption. In fact, we're coming up on our billionth transaction.
Wow.
It's I don't know the day. I think somebody is probably counting it down within the team here, but we're coming up on our billionth transaction on the network. And there's only one other platform that's done that. I think Ethereum is the only other platform that's done that, that's met that milestone. And we've done it in a year and a half, which is fantastic. So, the adoption by applications is very gratifying. The breadth of the types of use cases that are being built on top of us, healthcare related use cases associated with, protecting people in third world nations and war-torn areas. There are use cases protecting people in Syria, or giving them the opportunity to take precautions when they hear that missiles perhaps are coming in. Some of those are, use cases you would never have imagined that we might be used for. Use cases associated with COVID and tracking the status of the vaccine, ensuring that it's not getting too warm. You have to keep COVID at a really low temperature, otherwise it goes bad. Has to be used very quickly. Just the breadth and adoption is great to see, and it's great to be a part of it. So, is there anything really exciting? We're moving from what I call the startup phase to growth phase. Like I said, last year was all about finding that product market fit. I think we've found it. And what's happening now is that now that the friction has been removed, the market's adopting. And keeping up with that and accelerating that is the focus for the immediate future, and I'm sure through the rest of this year.
That last point you made, I think that's so true in this space, because what I mean by that is the time aspect or time scale. Many people in the crypto world, because they're so used to fast gains, they expect projects to go from zero to global adoption in like 2 years or 3 years, right? Yeah. It's like everyone's expectation is this company better be the next Amazon or Google like by next year. It's just not how things work. You look at these big tech powerhouses, they've been around for decades, that before they got to where they were, right? Or where they are, I should say. So I think that's really important. I think a lot of people judge crypto projects, unfairly based on time. And, that's just my opinion.
Well, no, I completely agree. And it's also the case that we're moving at warp speed. Not just us, but the industry is moving at warp speed. I mean, if you think about our project, we only started this in 2017. All right. We had a white paper by the end of 2017. That was just less than 4 years ago. And, thinking back to when we had our first 5 people on staff to now where we are in building marketplaces and networks that are being adopted to solve real world problems on an enterprise and global scale. It's fantastic.
So final question for you, just whatever comes to mind.
Okay.
What are your thoughts about Bitcoin?
So, I've always sort of understood and believed the Bitcoin opportunity. And I've always worried that it could be killed, right? I've always thought it was fragile.
Okay.
It's not as fragile, obviously, it's not as fragile today as it was 5 years ago. And I expect that I'm assuming that the market will continue to grow and be strong, and that it will continue to go up in value. And I could also believe that the world governments get together and say, hey, we're all going to start launching CBDCs, and we're going to enter a pact, and we don't want there to be this independent, non-government related currency, and we're collectively going to outlaw it. I don't have any reason, any more reason than anybody else to believe that, but just understanding how governments work and what their fears and desires are, and being able to manage their own economies and currencies associated with those economies, wouldn't surprise me in the least if that sort of thing were to happen. So it's still a big question mark in my mind. It's not fragile in the way that it was. And at the same time, as it grows, the bigger threat it becomes to world governments. And the world governments are now getting in the game. They're all going to have CBDCs. So there's still, who knows what's going to happen over the next 5 years.
Interesting. I think we could have a whole chat just about Bitcoin, but we would be off topic. That's all the questions I had. So thank you for coming on the show and answering. And for everyone else, hopefully you enjoyed it. Please check out Hedera Hashgraph. We have a lot of exciting things, so make sure you check them out. So again, Mance, thank you for coming on to the show.
No, thanks for having me. It's been fun. Glad to be
this
here.
Is a good chat. I would say this is one of my better interviews, and I think we covered a lot.
Cool.
So for everyone else, make sure you smash the like, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for my next video.